For nearly 50 years, the silence was the loudest part of the story. When journalists asked James Garner about Steve McQueen, the charm would flicker. He'd deflect. He'd smirk. He'd say, "We got along fine." But the eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a man who had seen the fire behind the cool exterior of Hollywood's King of Cool. Steve McQueen was a ghost that haunted the set of The Great Escape, a ghost driven by ego, paranoia, and a hunger that Garner understood better than anyone. But Garner was a fighter, too. He survived the Great Depression, Korean War shrapnel, and the studio system. He wasn't afraid of McQueen. He was disappointed. Now, long after both men have left the screen, Garner's private journals and memoirs finally expose the raw, unfiltered truth. This is not a story of hatred. This is the story of a rivalry that never had to happen. This is James Garner finally breaking his silence on Steve McQueen. To understand the collision, you have to understand the foundations. James Garner was born James Scott Bumgarner in Denver, Oklahoma. He was a Depression child forged in hard clay. His childhood was a noir film of its own: abandonment, an abusive stepmother, and a survival instinct so sharp it could cut glass. By the time he stepped onto a Hollywood set, Garner had already been shot twice, once by the enemy in Korea, and once by friendly fire. He carried shrapnel in his body and a stone-cold sense of justice in his heart. He wasn't acting tough, he was tough. Across the town, Steve McQueen was rising from a different kind of darkness. An absent father, a mother who abandoned him, a reform school stint. McQueen didn't just want fame, he needed it to fill a void that could never be filled. Where Garner played the charming, witty gambler and maverick, McQueen played the silent, violent anti-hero. They were two sides of the same American coin, one polished, one rusted. By 1962, their orbits were about to collide in a German POW camp called Stalag Luft 3. The film was The Great Escape. And it would become the most psychologically complex war film ever made, not because of the script, but because of the silent war happening off camera. Director John Sturges knew he was lighting a fuse. He had cast Garner as Hendley, the scrounger, a role requiring charm and intelligence, the glue that holds the escape plan together. McQueen was cast as Hiltz, the cooler king, the rebel with the baseball glove and the motorcycle. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, Garner later wrote in his memoir The Garner Files, McQueen was a pain in the ass. Garner claimed he looked at McQueen like a kid brother. But McQueen didn't want a brother. He wanted the throne. The tension started with the motorcycles. McQueen insisted on doing his own writing, a legendary feat, yes, but Garner noticed the diva behavior that came with it. McQueen arrived on set in a Rolls-Royce while the rest of the cast drove standard cars or took the studio bus. He stayed in a private chalet, isolated from the camaraderie Garner was trying to build. But the real breaking point was the hero complex. Garner reveals that McQueen was terrified of looking weak. In one explosive moment, McQueen went to Sturges and demanded more dialogue, more close-ups. He was convinced Garner's scrounger was going to steal the picture. Garner, ever the pragmatist, caught wind of this. He knew the truth: this wasn't about acting. This was about survival. Steve had this thing: he always thought someone was out to get him. He thought I was sleeping with his wife. Can you believe that? I told him, "Steve, I'm too tired to sleep with your wife. I'm working 16 hours a day." Asterisk. The paranoia was real. Garner writes that McQueen's wife, Neil Adams, once confided in him that Steve was deeply insecure. McQueen accused Garner of having an affair with Neil, a claim Garner calls baseless and insane. The tension on the set of The Great Escape wasn't a rivalry of fists, it was a rivalry of psyches. Garner, the older brother who had his life together, versus McQueen, the wild child desperate to prove he was the alpha. Director John Sturges was so frustrated with McQueen's tantrums that he reportedly considered shifting the film's focus entirely to Garner. But Garner refused. He declined the power play. Why? Because Garner knew that if you fight a crazy person, you lose. For decades, Garner kept the peace. He did press tours. He smiled. He praised McQueen's bullet and Papillon publicly. But privately, the wounds of the Great Escape festered. It wasn't until 2011, 3 years before Garner's own death in 2014, that he finally broke his silence. He published the Garner files. And in those pages, the mask came off. Garner wrote that McQueen was more of a movie star than an actor. He accused him of relying on a persona rather than range. Coming from Garner, who had the range to do screwball comedy, high-octane racing dramas, and the heartbreaking romance of The Notebook, this was a dagger. Garner admitted that McQueen was difficult, jealous, and insecure. But here is the twist that Garner wanted the world to know: Garner didn't hate him. In his final interviews about McQueen, Garner's voice softened. He realized that McQueen was not a villain, he was a victim of his own trauma. Garner, who had also survived a brutal childhood, saw the reflection. The difference was that Garner had therapy, a stable marriage to Lois Clark, which lasted 58 years, and a sense of humor. McQueen had speed, alcohol, and an inability to trust. Garner finally admitted, "I felt sorry for him." So, why does this matter in 2026? Because the Garner perspective rewrites the narrative of the McQueen legend. For years, fans romanticized McQueen's behavior as genius. Garner exposes it as pain. When Garner revealed that McQueen threw tantrums because he was scared, he humanized the monster. Garner's silence wasn't cowardice. It was class. He waited until McQueen was gone, until the dust had settled on their generation, to tell the truth, not to destroy McQueen, but to explain him. The untold battle of the Great Escape wasn't for the fence line. It was for the soul of masculinity on screen. Garner represented the stoic, witty survivor. McQueen represented the ticking time bomb. In the end, Garner won the long game. He lived longer. He stayed in love longer. And he got the last word. His memoir sits in the library as a eulogy and a critique. James Garner finally broke his silence, not with a shout, but with a whisper of truth. He told us that the king of cool was just a man drowning in his own ego. And he told us that you can share a screen with a legend, feel the heat of their fire, and still walk away with your dignity intact. Garner kept the secret for 50 years out of respect. He broke the silence to set the record straight. For the fans who grew up idolizing both men, the truth is a hard pill to swallow. But as Garner would say, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. What do you think? Was Garner right to keep quiet for so long? Or is McQueen's legacy untouchable? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's hidden rivalries, subscribe for more untold stories.